Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time we're going to get into global trade and tech giants and how they're all kind of mixed up in this crazy economic dance we're all doing. You can think about it like trade wars and Twitter titans. That's our own little headline for today. We're going to be looking at the potential consequences globally for the economy of all these trade wars that have been going on and how these tech giants like Elon Musk are right in the middle of it.
It's interesting how all these different things are bumping into each other right now, Like we've got international trade agreements, social media is on the rise, and even just individual personalities are shaping how the global economy is going to work in the future.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
So let's rewind a little bit. Recently, there's been a lot of tension, especially with all these tariffs that the U.S. has been putting in place. And what really jumped out at me when I was reading through this material was how fast everything was changing. Like 1 minute, there's a 25% tariff on Colombian coffee, and then poof, it's gone. Same thing for Mexico and Canada. Tariffs just pop up and disappear in just a few days. It felt almost like someone was playing economic whack-a-mole.
Oh, that's a good analogy. Yeah, it was a time with a lot of uncertainty, that's for sure. And that unpredictability may have been the whole point. There's a theory that it was all a tactic to kind of keep everyone on edge, keep those trading partners guessing and pressure them into making concessions.
So instead of just negotiating the normal way, it was more like trying to throw everyone off balance and see who cracks first.
Yeah, exactly. But it's super risky. It could just as easily backfire and cause more retaliation instead of, you know, getting everybody to cooperate.
And that's exactly what happened,
Yeah.
right? China didn't just take it lying down.
Right. China retaliated with their own tariffs on important U.S. exports like coal and natural gas. And this tit for tat, with the tariffs going back and forth, immediately made people worry about a potential trade war, with both of their economies hanging in the balance.
So this might sound kind of basic, but I got to ask, how does something that's happening on a global scale like this with countries and tariffs, how does it affect, regular people like you and me?
Oh, that's a super important question. Think of it like this. Tariffs make things we import more expensive, right? So because of that, you could end up paying more for everything you buy, like the coffee you drink every morning or even the car you drive.
So those trade wars that seem so abstract, they could actually hit us all right in the wallet.
Exactly. And it's not just about prices going up. Trade wars can really mess up global supply chains, and that can lead to shortages of certain products. And businesses that rely on international trade, they're going to suffer, which could even mean people losing their jobs. The effects can be really widespread.
Okay, so things are heating up, tensions are running high. What can countries actually do to counter these tariffs and try to protect their own economies?
Well, one strategy that a lot of countries use is something called currency manipulation. There was a lot of talk, for example, about China maybe devaluing their currency, the yuan, to kind of offset the impact of the U.S. tariffs.
Now, I'll admit, currency manipulation sounds a little bit like something you'd see in a spy movie. Can you break that down for us a bit? Like, how does that actually work, and why would a country do that?
Okay, so imagine this. If China makes their currency cheaper compared to the U.S. dollar, their products suddenly become more attractive to people buying things in the U.S. because all of a sudden everything's more affordable. And at the same time, all the stuff from the U.S. becomes more expensive for Chinese consumers. So it's a way to try and boost their own exports and rely less on imports.
So it's a strategic move to gain an advantage on the global market.
Yep. But it's risky. Currency manipulation can make global financial markets really unstable. Imagine countries trying to outdo each other, constantly devaluing their currency. It could turn into a full-blown currency war, and that would create chaos and uncertainty for everybody.
So this whole situation is incredibly complicated, right? We've got tariffs going back and forth, potential trade wars brewing, and now we've got countries potentially messing around with their currencies. It's a lot to keep up with. And on top of all that, we have to think about the role of technology, specifically how much influence these tech giants like Elon Musk are getting.
Yeah, that's where things get really interesting. We're seeing the lines getting blurred between the tech world, finance, and even global politics.
Okay, I'm intrigued. I mean, Musk is definitely a big personality. He's always talking on social media. But how does a tech CEO play a role in global trade and economic policy?
Well, Musk's influence doesn't just come from being the CEO of Tesla and SpaceX. It also comes from his control over platforms like Twitter. He has this massive platform online to share his opinions and potentially shape how the public sees things.
So he's not just an innovator, he's also got a powerful voice in shaping the narrative around these really important issues.
Exactly. And that gives him a lot of influence, especially in today's world where social media plays such a big role in shaping people's opinions and what we talk about.
But how does this all connect back to the trade wars and the economic tensions we were just talking about?
Well, think about this. Musk hasn't really shown much interest in buying TikTok, but he's been very public about wanting to get government contracts for Tesla and SpaceX. That raises some interesting questions about what he really cares about and how he might use his influence in this whole web of global trade and economic policy.
It sounds like he's trying to position himself to take advantage of these changes happening on a global scale.
It sure seems that way. And that brings up the possibility of clashes between Musk and those traditional power structures, like the US government. The stuff we read suggests that Musk's control over social media could give him a lot of leverage, like he could really sway public opinion, and that could put him at odds with people in power.
So are we talking about a power struggle here? Like between a tech giant and the government? This is getting intense.
Yeah, it really highlights how the dynamics of power are changing in the 21st century. Individuals who control these huge digital platforms can have as much influence as traditional institutions, or maybe even more. It's a whole new kind of power dynamic, and we're only just beginning to understand it.
We've gone from tariffs and trade wars to currency manipulation, and now a potential power struggle between a tech giant and the government. It's clear that the global landscape is getting more complex and more unpredictable. It feels like we're standing at the edge of this massive shift in power, and it's really hard to say what the long-term consequences are going to be.
You hit the nail on the head. That's exactly why it's so important to understand these different forces that are all pushing and pulling on each other. They're not just abstract economic ideas. They can have a huge impact on our lives. It's a fascinating landscape, but it can also be a little bit unnerving.
This has been incredibly insightful. I'm really interested to explore these impacts a bit deeper, especially how social media plays into all this. It's obviously not just about sharing funny cat videos anymore.
Oh, definitely not. Social media has become this powerful force, and understanding how it can be used for manipulation, especially when it comes to economic news, is super important if we want to figure out how to navigate this new world order.
Okay, so before we jump into that, let's just quickly recap what we've talked about so far. We started by looking at the crazy world of tariffs and how these unpredictable moves might have actually been on purpose to try and gain an advantage. Then we talked about how those actions cause retaliation, especially from China, and how countries might try to manipulate their currency to offset those impacts. But then things got even more interesting when we started talking about the role of these tech giants, particularly Elon Musk, and how his influence through social media could potentially shake up those traditional power structures we're all used to. It's clear that this is just the tip of the iceberg, and I, for one, am ready to dive deeper into this economic ocean. But we'll save that for part 2. So make sure to join us again for the next part of this deep dive, where we'll really unpack the implications of social media manipulation and explore what we can do to navigate this increasingly complex world. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everyone. It's amazing when you think about how much power these guys like Elon Musk actually have. It's like they've got this direct line to millions of people who want to hear what they have to say about, everything from space travel to tariffs.
Yeah, that's true. And speaking of tariffs, let's bring it back to our main stage here. Trade wars and Twitter titans. How does Musk's influence on social media actually play into this whole complicated economic landscape we've been talking about?
Well, one of the things that worries me the most is the potential for manipulation, on these platforms. We've seen this shift away from experts actually verifying information, and now it's more about what the community decides is true. And that can be a real problem because it means misinformation can spread really quickly, especially when it comes to economic news.
Yeah, that is a little bit scary. It's like the Wild West of information out there.
It really is. Imagine this. Someone who's got something to gain could easily manipulate public opinion about economic stuff. Maybe they spread false rumors about how a company's doing financially, or try to make government policies look bad.
So it's not just about influencing what people think about everyday things anymore. We're talking about potentially messing with markets and even influencing government policy.
Exactly. The stakes are super high. This kind of manipulation can make people lose trust in institutions and experts. When anyone can say anything they want and have it spread all over social media, it becomes almost impossible to tell what's true and what's not.
So what can we do about it? How do we even navigate this world where there's so much misinformation flying around?
Well, it comes down to being more careful about the information we consume. We have to be skeptical, especially when information comes from sources that have a clear agenda or are trying to push a certain narrative because it benefits them.
This is not just about being informed, it's about being critical of the information we're getting.
Exactly. We need to get better at evaluating sources, figuring out if they're biased, and checking information from different places. In the world of economic news, even small mistakes can have big consequences.
It sounds like media literacy and critical thinking are more important now than ever. It's like we all need to become digital detectives. But what about on a larger scale? What can countries do to handle this crazy landscape?
That's where things get tricky. One approach is to make regulations stronger, to try and fight misinformation and make social media platforms responsible for what they're hosting. Another way is to invest in education and public awareness campaigns, so we can give individuals the tools to recognize manipulation tactics.
So it's kind of a two-pronged approach, like tackling the problem from a technological angle and a societal angle.
Exactly. It's not just about reducing the negative impacts, it's also about using technology for good. Social media can be a really powerful tool for connecting people, sharing knowledge, and having informed debates. The challenge is making sure these platforms are used responsibly and ethically.
It seems like finding that balance is key. Protecting free speech, but also protecting people from manipulation and harm.
Yep, that's the tightrope we're walking. And it takes constant vigilance. But in the end, it's a challenge we have to face if we want to build a stable and successful future in this digital world.
This is a lot to take in. We started with trade wars, looked at the possibility of economic chaos, and now we're dealing with this very real threat of social media manipulation. It's clear that the global economic landscape is changing all the time, with power dynamics shifting and new players coming in. What really struck me from what we've been reading is this idea of a domino effect, like how even small actions can set off a chain of unintended consequences.
That's a powerful image. It really shows how everything's connected. In this globalized world, it's getting harder and harder to predict what the long-term consequences of any action are going to be.
So how do we make sense of all this? How do we figure out what these domino effects are going to be and make good decisions when the rules of the game seem to be changing constantly?
That's the million-dollar question. It means we have to change how we think. Be willing to accept that things are uncertain and be ready to adapt to change. We need to encourage a culture of lifelong learning, where we're always trying to learn new things, challenge what we think we know, and keep updating our understanding of the world.
It's like we're all being called to become more informed, more engaged, and more adaptable. It's like we're all playing this giant game of economic chess, and the moves are getting more and more complex and unpredictable. But we can learn to play the game better, right?
Of course we can. We can adapt and innovate. The key is to realize that we're in uncharted territory. The old ways of doing things don't work anymore. We need to be open to new ways of thinking, new ways of solving problems, and new ways of working together. We need to learn from each other, share what we know, and work together to figure out how to navigate this new world order.
Okay, so we've been talking about trade wars, tech giants, social media manipulation, but it still feels like we're only seeing the tip of the iceberg when it comes to this big power shift happening globally. It's like watching this slow-motion earthquake, and nobody knows what things are going to look like when it's all over.
Yeah, you're right. It's a time of massive change, and that means big challenges, but also big opportunities. The old way of doing things with all the established institutions and power structures is fading away.
So what takes its place?
Right.
What's this new world order going to look like? And what's it going to mean for us?
Well, that's the question everybody's trying to figure out. It's not like there's one single thing or idea taking over. Instead, what we're seeing is power kind of spreading out. Nation states are still important, but now they've got to deal with these multinational corporations, these influential people with huge online platforms, and even these decentralized movements that get started on social media.
It's like somebody flipped the chessboard over and we're all trying to figure out the new rules.
Exactly. And one of the biggest things shaping all of this is technology, especially these digital platforms. And the way information spreads so fast, we're more connected than ever, but that also makes us more vulnerable.
We've seen how that can play out with social media manipulation. Are there other risks or consequences to being so connected?
Oh, absolutely. Think about economic shocks, for example, in the past. If there was a crisis in one part of the world, it took a while to spread. But now, with financial markets all linked up and instant communication, a crisis can go global in a matter of hours.
So this new world order is faster, more complex, and potentially more unstable. So what does that mean for regular people trying to make sense of it all?
It means being adaptable and resilient is more important than ever. The old way of getting a degree and working for the same company your whole life is over. We need to be lifelong learners, always updating our skills, learning about new technologies, and being open to new opportunities.
So instead of being scared of change, we need to learn how to ride the wave.
Exactly. And that means changing our mindset. We need to get comfortable with not knowing everything except uncertainty and be willing to try new things and learn from our mistakes.
So it's almost like we need a global mindset, a way of thinking that sees the world as connected and always changing.
That's it. And that also means understanding and respecting different cultures, different points of view, and different ways of doing things. The answers to these really complicated problems we're facing are probably going to come from unexpected places, from people working together across borders and across different fields.
Thinking back to the source material for this deep dive, trade wars and Twitter titans, it seems like the global economy is turning into this super complicated dance with tons of partners and steps to learn.
Oh, that's a great analogy. And just like any dance, it takes coordination balance and a willingness to adapt to what your partner is doing. But the music is changing, the tempo is getting faster, and new dancers are joining in all the time.
So how do we as individuals learn the steps to this new dance? Where do we even start?
It starts with awareness. We need to understand the forces at play, the power dynamics, and what could happen if different actions are taken. That's where deep dives like this one are so helpful. They help us understand all the complicated parts, connect the dots, and see the big picture.
Knowledge is power, right?
Mhm.
But in this new world order, it's not just about having knowledge, it's about using it, adapting it, and sharing it.
Absolutely. We need to be active in shaping this new world, not just sitting back and watching. And that means having informed discussions, questioning what we think and being open to new ideas. It also means holding the people in power accountable, whether it's governments, corporations, or those influencers on social media.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. We started with trade wars, but it quickly turned into this bigger exploration of global power dynamics, technology, changing everything, and even how we understand truth and information in the digital age.
And that's the great thing about these deep dives. They let us peel back the layers and see how all these seemingly separate issues are actually connected.
I think one of the most important things I'm taking away from this is that we're all in this together. The problems we're facing are global, and they need global solutions. We can't afford to just isolate ourselves or focus only on our own countries. We need to work together, share what we know, and collaborate to create a better future for everyone. A future that's more sustainable and more fair.
I couldn't agree more. The future is uncertain, but it's not set in stone. We have the power to shape it, but to do that, we need to be informed, engaged, and brave in what we do.
This deep dive has been amazing. It's given us a much better understanding of how complicated our globalized world is. A huge thanks to our expert for sharing their insights and helping us navigate this whole web of information. And to you, our listener, thank you for joining us on this journey. Remember, the world's changing fast, but you have the power not only